academic citizenship beyond borders. As well as the audience in this room, we have a live stream audience. Welcome to the people on the live stream as well. So the audience goes beyond this room, and that's very appropriate for an event thinking about academic citizenship beyond borders. For the live stream audience, you're welcome to send questions on Twitter. There's a Twitter account you can tweet your questions to, and somebody will field them. And just a note that if you want to, we're going to have lots of time for questions and a discussion period at the end. And because we're live streaming, we ask that everybody uses a microphone so the live stream audience can pick it up. And we'll be, two of our participants are not here in the room. They'll be joining us on Skype also, so another kind of connection. I'm Sophia Woodman. I'm in sociology and one of the conveners with Alistair Hunter, who's over there, of the Citizens, Nations and Migration Network, which was one of the sponsors of this event. We'd also like to thank our other sponsors, the Global Development Academy, the Centre for the Study of Modern and Contemporary History, and the BRAC Solidarity Edinburgh, which has been centrally involved in organising this. So we'll have conversations today on China, Bangladesh, Uganda and Turkey in that order. They're short because we're covering 4 countries, but we really wanted to look at various situations around the world, and some information as well on how Edinburgh is responding to these and other challenges in which scholars and scholarship are at risk. So each of the country sections will be in the form of a conversation with an interlocutor who's here in the room, talking with somebody else, and they will introduce the main speaker. And as I said, we'll have a chance for discussion in the end, and we're happy if you want to bring in other country contexts, other issues around this theme, and so on. So first, I'd like to welcome Professor James Smith, VP International and Professor of African and Development Studies, to say something about how Edinburgh is addressing academics at risk around the world. Unfortunately, James has to leave us early, so after his remarks, we'll have a brief period for questions if you want to ask any. So, over to you, James.
I need 3 hands to do this. Excuse me a second. Thanks very much, everybody, for coming, and thanks for inviting me to say a few words. I feel extremely overdressed. I don't normally wear a suit, but we just rushed from a graduation ceremony where we were giving the Principal's Medal to 2 of our undergraduate students who run a charity which provides solar-powered mobile phone charging units in refugee camps in Greece. So we just awarded the Principal's Medal to undergraduates, which is quite unusual, but I guess it does speak to specific ways in which the university community provides support to not just academics at risk, but populations at risk. And I guess maybe within my remarks, I think it's important for us to think about what the university is. The university is this institution and a collection of mailing lists and all kinds of things which govern and regulate us, but it's also the community of 53,000 students and staff who I think, what I know, have different viewpoints and different beliefs and come from different parts of the world. So I think one of the challenges we have as a complex, diverse, quite opinionated community is thinking about how we support people in different contexts in different places. I was thinking about academic citizenship a bit this morning when I was just writing some notes to myself, and it is really, it's quite dear to me. I went to study for my master's in South Africa in 1996. It was a very exciting time. It was the new South Africa. Mandela was president. Everything was very exciting. Everything was very hopeful. But and I used to hang out in what was euphemistically called the postgraduate club on the campus of Ege University in Johannesburg. It was actually essentially a bar. And I used to speak to older professors, older academics, including my supervisor, and they talked of a very different South Africa. They talked of giving a lecture on Marxist geography and identifying secret police in the back of the class. They would be wearing suits, much like myself. All the students are wearing shorts and T-shirts. They would talk about being tortured under interrogation, being made to stand on bricks for hours on end, and if they stood off the bricks, they would get beaten. They talked about doing field work in townships as white academics, which meant leaving after midnight and avoiding roadblocks and risking imprisonment if they were caught. And of course, they talked about their friends who lost their lives, such as Professor David Webster, who's an anthropologist at my university, who was assassinated by the secret police in 1989, essentially because his research was uncovering some of the atrocities that were taking place in townships. So you had this kind of juxtaposition, I guess, of this kind of happy, joyful, forward-looking South Africa, but this kind of very recent memory of some of the academic impositions that were happening on campus and within classrooms. So I guess that is really important in many ways. It's important not to forget that. But it also makes me think that living in a university like Edinburgh, in a city like Edinburgh, in a country like Scotland, in the UK, we can all become quite complacent, I think. Apart from the occasional rude email, and I do get some exceptionally rude emails from people, maybe the odd offensive tweet or really offensive comment, especially if one writes a discovery, if you write an article for the Scotsman in particular, you tend to get quite rude comments from people. But that's the extent of it. You can, as an academic, I feel I can do and say pretty much as I please, as long as I'm careful about how I phrase things. So I don't feel encumbered and constrained in that way. We're a very international university, as you know. It's one of the things we're proud of. We have a staff and student population of 21,500 from overseas, from outside the UK, from 172, 173 countries, and that's clearly wonderful. And it provides opportunities to have conversations. It provides opportunities to think about how we connect with people and academics in other parts of the world. It can also, I find, potentially be quite problematic. It can mean when we're trying to think about how we do things in some parts of the world, we have communities who are almost at loggerheads with each other or risk offending and upsetting each other. So I think for me, one of the things we have as a huge possibility, a huge potential, is to think about how we can make more of that community and have more productive conversations across some of the delineations which might actually be quite complex. So divergent viewpoints are really good, but I think we can probably make more of them, and we can make them maybe a bit less antagonistic, and that's something I find very, very much very important in this role. It's a week of degree ceremonies. On Tuesday, we gave an honorary degree to Maurice Wren, who's the CEO of Refugee Council, and that was a very nice ceremony. He obviously has made a massive contribution over 20 or 30 years of his career. And one of the memories I evoked in that degree ceremony was of Professor Max Born, who was a professor of natural philosophy in the university from the 30s to the 50s when he was awarded the Nobel Prize for Physics. Max Born was German. Max Born was kicked out of his job in his university in Germany in 1934 due to the imposition of anti-Semitic laws. He then went into exile in the UK. He was then stripped of his citizenship, and it was at that point he was given a professorship at the UK in Edinburgh at that time. And I guess it speaks a little bit to history of what Edinburgh's been doing around working with and accepting refugees. And it speaks, I think, apart from the human cost that Professor Bourne and his family suffered, the personal cost of having to relocate very rapidly, it speaks to the possibility of the loss if there hadn't been that support in place, if there hadn't been the ability for him to move countries. And I think that is really important as well. So as I said, I think the university is not a place, a thing. It's not me as a vice principal. It's all of us. It's all of us in our kind of complicated, contested glory. It's a set of communities. It's a community. It's a community which is both from somewhere else and looks somewhere else and all the places in between, and that's really important. And I think that suggests that we need to work quite hard to make the most of that community. I think we do a lot as a university to support academic freedoms. I think we could do a lot more, and I think it's incumbent upon all of us to work together to think about how we can do that. Maybe I can give three, maybe they're not quite themes, but they're three ways in which I feel the university does at least something, and we'll hear a bit more about that today. And it's really great that we have Academics for Peace and organisations like that which do really concrete things, and I think also push and provoke and make the university aspire to do better things. I think that's really important. So most of the things we do which are good are, I believe, driven from below, not from above. I guess we offer practical support, very, very practical things. We are a partner with a Council for At-Risk Academics. Each year we support between 3 and 6 academics to spend time here, which gives them a break or allows them to spend time out of the country at which they were at risk. I think we can do more there. I think what I tend to find is those academics tend to end up accommodated in schools in social sciences and humanities. I find possibly the other colleges are a bit less accommodating in terms of saying, well, we can help here. And I think there is an institutional conversation we have to have there to recognise we all have a responsibility to work with organisations like CARA and support academics. We're developing quite a lot of foundations. We have a very productive partnership we're about to launch. I'd hope to be able to say something today, but I can't yet, with a Middle East-based foundation which will support refugee students from Syria, Palestine and the Yemen, 10 full scholarships a year to study in Edinburgh. So these are kind of concrete, practical things, and this is where I think the university, the institution, can play an important role, provoked by the community here. We provide different support for undergraduate students who are refugees or seeking asylum in Scotland. We essentially don't charge fees for students in those positions. I think that's really great. I think many Scottish universities have followed suit. I think we could do more to help refugees make the leap from where they are outside the university into the university. But again, it's a start. It's how can we work on these things together. The second way in which I think we can work really effectively is through partnership. And I guess partnership is quite a problematic, contested term. I'm a professor of African development, and quite a lot of what I spend my time thinking about is what does partnership mean in contexts where there's massive asymmetries between one partnership and another. And, you know, partnership gets taken a bit like sustainability. It's, you know, seen as a good thing. It might not be a good thing. But I think in a university like this, we have to think about what partnership means, and we have to think about the levels at which it's constituted. A partnership can be an organisation led by students or staff having a relationship with a body elsewhere. It might be an institutional partnership. It can be individual relationships between academics. It can be all of these things. And I think we have to recognise, much as we should problematise what partnership means, we need to recognise that at different levels those partnerships can drive many, many different things. And I think quite a lot of what we'll be hearing about today is essentially about partnership in many ways. So I think that's really important. It can, of course, lead to those difficult conversations. Should we have a partnership in some parts of the world? Should we have a stronger partnership in others? And that's where I think the contestations come back into play. And in many ways, I'm pulled back to thinking about South Africa and apartheid South Africa and cultural boycotts and educational boycotts. And they're often things which are evoked in a university like this. Why are we doing this in that country? Why we should be pulling back? And because we're such a complex university, a complex set of people, we have to think quite carefully about that kind of thing. So partnership is good, but I think we should talk about it more. And 3, I think, is really about self-reflection. I think we need to reflect on what higher education is, and especially perhaps on the particular legacy of universities like this one in the English-speaking world, especially the old universities, the legacies they've had in shaping what higher education is and how it's perceived and how it's manifested itself overseas. So I think reflecting on that history is important, reflecting on that legacy is really important, even thinking about what an Enlightenment university actually means in the modern context is important. And I think thinking about what values we can take from that and what values we should be developing in a more modern context where the way in which higher education is developed in different contexts and the freedoms and constraints people have are quite different. And in some cases might be to a certain extent due to things that we did as a university in the UK in the past. So I think that's really important. Reflecting on the nature of partnerships and those ethics is really important. And I have to say, as a white male professor of African studies and African development based in a colonial byproduct centre of African studies, I feel the need to think about that very urgently, actually, thinking about how we construct knowledge, who we construct knowledge for, and what that means for higher education elsewhere as well as here. And I think that might be something that myself, and I see Sarah Jane, my colleague, is here, and Zoe, we feel very keenly in African studies, but I also think generally it's something we should be reflecting on and problematizing in all disciplines and all levels of the university. That's really important. I guess I have to make an apology. I was at a graduation. I've got to go and have dinner with Dr. Dennis Mukwege, who's receiving an honorary degree tomorrow. Maybe I'll just tell you why he's receiving an honorary degree and it'll make a bit more sense. Dr. Mukwege is a gynecologist who's fought tirelessly for justice for women in the Congo, and he's spent the last 10 or 20 years treating women who suffered systematic sexual abuse. He's built hospitals, he advocates for women, he lobbies for equal gender rights. And in doing that, he's come into massive, massive conflict, both with the government in the Congo, but also rebel groups. And a few years ago, he and his family survived an armed assault in his own home by playing dead. So again, going back to maybe going back from the kind of relatively sterile academic conversation we might have here to realities of what an unfreedom might be, what an unfree world might be in a context like the Congo is really important. So I think there's a constant need and an urgent need for solidarity and for action. And I think the university, through the community, because that's what the university is, does a lot. And I'm always amazed and heartened by what students do, what staff do, what academics do, what professional staff do, and that's really powerful. And I think what the institution of the university can do is provide ways to help those activities and those partnerships and those conversations flourish. There's always more to be done, I think it's important not to recognise that. It's also important, I think, not to beat ourselves up about that. We need to find ways to do more, a bit more productively and a bit more efficiently. And if we think about partnerships, and we think about our history and our legacy, then I think we can do quite a lot more by doing a little bit more, if you see what I mean. So that's it, really. I would just like to welcome you to Edinburgh. I'm really sorry I have to leave. I hope you have a very productive conversation. And I'd just like to really congratulate Sophia and Isabel for all they've done in bringing this together with support from elsewhere, and also for what you're going to be talking about a bit later today, which I think is a really good example of where the university can do something really good through a little bit of a challenge from the academic community and through what you believe in and who you're working with. So thank you very much. That's it for me. And I'm happy to take any questions if you have any or not. No?